I was in my home office, just finishing up some emails, when my phone started buzzing. Not a gentle vibration, but a persistent, almost frantic series of pings. The first text was from my colleague, Emily, just a link, followed by 3 question marks. Then Laura, a friend I'd known for years, sent the exact same link with a single word, wow. By the time the 5th message lit up my screen, my hands were already a little unsteady, even before I clicked on it. The video opened, and there was my niece, Chloe, sitting in what I instantly recognized as her dorm room at Duke University. She was perfectly lit, of course, by one of those ring lights influencers all seem to use. She was dressed in designer everything, head-to-toe labels I could spot from the thumbnail alone. And then her opening line hit me like a splash of ice water. So, let's talk about my aunt who shops exclusively at Target and thinks she's doing something. I watched the entire 8-minute video without once hitting pause. Chloe went through this whole routine about family gatherings, even imitating the way I supposedly walk and talk. She held up her phone to show a photo someone had taken of me at Thanksgiving, zooming in on my jeans and sweater with dramatic horror movie music playing underneath. This woman shows up to every holiday looking like she just finished a shift at the dollar store, she declared, and her roommate laughed, just off camera. The comments were already in the thousands, most of them laughing right along with her. The view counter sat at 2.1 million when I finally closed the browser. My sister, Michelle, called about half an hour later. Her voice already had that familiar defensive edge before she even said hello. Chloe showed me what she posted. Look, she's young and didn't mean anything by it. You know how kids are with social media these days. She's 20 years old, Michelle. That's not a kid. She's still in college. She's figuring things out. Michelle sighed, making it sound like I was the one being unreasonable. Besides, you have to admit you could dress a little nicer for family events. Would it kill you to go to Saks Fifth Avenue once in a while? I hung up without responding. My hands were steady now, but something cold had settled deep in my chest. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. Most were from Michelle, but 3 were from David, and 1 was from my mother. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I made coffee and sat on my back porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, waved from her garden, completely oblivious to the storm happening in my life. Jessica texted me around 9. Are you okay? That video is everywhere. People from our old college are sharing it. I typed back a simple response, I'm fine. Just processing. Do you want to talk about it? I can come over. Not yet, but thank you. The thing about being publicly humiliated is that it follows you into spaces you thought were safe. I went to the grocery store that afternoon, the same store I'd shopped at for years, and found myself wondering if the cashier had seen the video. If she was looking at my jeans and thinking about Chloe's commentary. If she was judging the generic brand items in my cart. I'd never cared about these things before. Now, they felt heavy with significance. Laura called that evening. Unlike Michelle, her voice was gentle. Honey, I saw what happened. How are you holding up? I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to pretend it never happened. Part of me is angrier than I've been in years. You have every right to be angry. What Chloe did was vicious. Michelle thinks I'm overreacting. Laura sighed deeply. Michelle has always had blinders when it comes to Chloe. That girl could rob a bank and Michelle would find a way to justify it. But this isn't about Michelle's feelings. This is about you being treated with basic human decency by your own family. We talked for over an hour. Laura reminded me of times throughout my life when I'd been there for family members who needed help. The time I'd paid for her son's emergency dental work when she was between jobs. The months I'd helped my parents with their mortgage after my father's heart attack. The quiet, unglamorous ways I'd shown up for people without expecting recognition or gratitude. You've never asked for anything in return, Laura said. The one thing you deserved was respect, and Chloe couldn't even give you that. After we hung up, I pulled out my old photo albums. There were pictures of Chloe as a baby, as a toddler, throughout her childhood. I'd been at the hospital the day she was born, had held her when she was hours old. I taught her to ride a bike when she was 7. I'd stayed up late helping her with a science project in middle school when Michelle was working a night shift. Looking at those photos, I tried to pinpoint where things had shifted. When had the sweet kid who used to draw me pictures become someone who could casually tear me down for entertainment? The trust fund had been established 13 years ago. Shortly after my company went public. I'd built a software platform in my garage that somehow caught the attention of 3 major tech firms in the same quarter. The acquisition offer came in at $42 million, and suddenly I had more money than I'd ever imagined possible. My financial advisor suggested diversifying, investing, building a portfolio. I did all of that, but I also set aside money for family. Michelle's daughter, Chloe, was 8 years old then, bright and curious, and full of potential. Michelle and her husband, David, were good people, but they'd never had much financial security. David taught high school history. Michelle worked part-time as a medical receptionist. They owned a modest house with a mortgage that stressed them out every month. I wanted to do something that would change Chloe's trajectory entirely. The trust fund was structured carefully with my attorney, Michael Lee's, help. The principal amount was $1.8 million, set to be released when Chloe turned 21. The investments had grown over the years, and the current value sat closer to $2.3 million, enough to pay for any education she wanted, start a business, buy a house, set herself up for genuine financial independence. But Michael had insisted on including what he called a character clause. "You're giving a child access to life-changing money," he'd said during one of our planning meetings. "You need protection against the possibility that she becomes someone who would waste it or use it harmfully." The clause was clear: the beneficiary must demonstrate good moral character and judgment to receive the funds. Any behavior that showed cruelty, deliberate harm to others, or lack of basic human decency could trigger a review by the fund manager. If the manager determined the clause had been violated, the funds would be redirected to designated charities instead. I'd agreed to it mostly because Michael was thorough about everything, not because I thought it would ever matter. Chloe had been a sweet kid. I'd imagined her growing into a thoughtful young woman who would use the money wisely. The fund manager was a fiduciary firm called Whitfield and Associates. They handled everything independently once the trust was established. I received annual reports on the fund's performance, but I had no direct control over the distribution decisions. That was intentional. Michael wanted to ensure nobody could accuse me of manipulating the terms based on personal feelings. Chloe's 21st birthday was scheduled for September 14th, exactly 16 days away. I didn't contact Whitfield and Associates. I didn't need to. Their firm had a standard practice of monitoring beneficiaries' public profiles in the months before a major distribution, checking for any red flags. It was part of their due diligence, something they did for all trusts with character clauses. 3 days after the video went viral, I received a call from Thomas Whitfield himself. His voice was professional but careful. "Miss Garrett, I'm calling regarding the trust fund established for Chloe Porter. I assume you've seen the social media content that's been brought to our attention." "I have. We need to schedule a formal review. The content appears to potentially violate the character clause as written in the trust documents. I want to be clear that this is standard procedure. We'll be conducting interviews and gathering additional information before making any determination." "I understand. I also need to inform you that as the trust grantor, you'll be asked to provide a statement about whether you believe the clause has been violated. Your opinion will be one factor in our assessment, but not the only factor." I told him I would cooperate fully with whatever the review required. The next few days felt surreal. I continued with my normal routine, client meetings, conference calls, reviewing contracts, but everything had this strange overlay of unreality. My assistant noticed I was distracted and asked if everything was okay. I told her I was dealing with a family situation, which was technically true. The video continued its viral spread. By day 4, it had been picked up by several of those gossip websites that compile funny social media content. Someone had even made it into a reaction GIF, capturing the moment Chloe held up my photo with an exaggerated expression of horror. That GIF was being used across X and Instagram, completely divorced from the original context. I wondered if Chloe understood what she'd created. This wasn't just a video anymore. It was content that would exist on the internet indefinitely. Years from now, someone could search my name and potentially find this. The permanence of digital cruelty is something people don't consider until it's too late. My mother called on day 5. Her voice was strained in that particular way that meant she was trying to stay neutral. "Sarah, I need to understand what's happening. Michelle says you're trying to take away Chloe's college fund." "It's not a college fund, Mom. And I'm not trying to take anything away. There's a process happening that was built into the trust from the beginning. But surely you can stop it. You created the trust. You have control." "I specifically set it up so I wouldn't have control. The fund manager makes decisions based on the terms of the trust document, not on my personal feelings." "So, you're hiding behind legal technicalities instead of helping your niece?" The accusation stung. "I'm respecting the structure I put in place to ensure the money would only go to someone who deserved it. Chloe demonstrated that she's not that person." My mother was quiet for a long moment. "She's made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes at 20. Mom, when you were 20, would you have publicly humiliated a family member for millions of people to laugh at? That's not fair. The world is different now. These kids don't understand the impact of social media." She understood enough to use professional lighting and edit the video for maximum effect. She understood enough to choose the most unflattering photo of me she could find. She understood enough to post it publicly instead of just sharing it with friends. This wasn't an accident or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated. My mother sighed. "I just hate seeing our family torn apart like this." The family was torn apart when Chloe made that video. I'm just the one who's not pretending everything is fine. After we hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall. The family dynamics were exactly what I'd expected. Everyone was more concerned with maintaining appearances and avoiding conflict than they were with addressing what had actually happened. It was easier to pressure me to let it go than to hold Chloe accountable. I pulled out my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding. I read through the comments on Chloe's video. Hundreds upon hundreds of strangers weighing in on my appearance, my worth, my life. Some of them were viciously cruel in ways that went far beyond Chloe's original mockery. Others were casual in their dismissiveness, as if I was just a punchline in their day's entertainment. But scattered throughout were comments that gave me pause. A few people had pushed back, calling Chloe out for being mean-spirited. One person wrote, "Imagine thinking you're better than someone because of where they shop. This says way more about you than your aunt." That comment had 847 likes, which felt like something. Another comment came from someone with a profile picture of a young woman in scrubs. "I'm a nurse and I shop at Target because I'm paying off student loans. This video is classless garbage and you should be ashamed." That one had 1,230 likes. The ratio of supportive to critical comments was still heavily skewed toward people who found the whole thing hilarious. But knowing that some strangers had defended me, people who didn't know me at all but recognized basic human decency, helped in a way I hadn't expected. Michelle called again that evening. Her voice was completely different from our previous conversations. She wasn't angry anymore. She was crying. "Did you do something? Chloe just got a letter from some law firm saying her trust fund is under review. What is going on? The trust has a character clause." The fund manager saw the video. Silence stretched between us for several seconds. When Michelle spoke again, her words came out fast and defensive. "You're going to ruin her life over a stupid video. She's a college student. Everyone makes mistakes. She's an adult who publicly humiliated a family member to millions of strangers. That's not a mistake, Michelle. That's a choice. So, you're going to take away her entire future because she hurt your feelings?" "I'm not taking anything away. The fund manager is following the terms that were established when the trust was created. This has nothing to do with my feelings." Michelle's voice cracked. "She's your niece. You're supposed to love her unconditionally. I do love her, but love doesn't mean removing all consequences from cruel behavior. Maybe if she'd learned that earlier, we wouldn't be here. I ended the call before Michelle could respond. Over the following week, the silence from my family was deafening. No calls, no texts, no attempts at communication. I'd been effectively cut off. And while part of me had expected this, another part felt the loss more acutely than I'd anticipated. These were people I'd shared holidays with, celebrated milestones with, supported through difficult times. Now I was the villain in their story, the vindictive aunt who destroyed a young woman's future over hurt feelings. I kept working, kept moving through my days with mechanical precision. But at night, alone in my house, I found myself questioning everything. Was I being too harsh? Was Michelle right that people Chloe's age didn't fully understand the implications of their actions? Should I have found a way to intervene before the fund manager made his decision? Then I would remember the video, the deliberate cruelty in Chloe's voice, the way she'd laugh while describing my clothes, the performance of it all calculated for maximum entertainment value at my expense. And I would remember that character isn't about understanding consequences. It's about having the basic empathy not to hurt people in the first place. Jessica invited me to dinner at her place. Her husband, Michael, had made his famous lasagna, and their 2 kids provided enough distraction that I could almost forget about everything for a few hours. But as we sat on their porch after dinner, drinking wine and watching the sunset, Jessica brought it up. "You know this isn't your fault, right?" she said quietly. "Everyone in my family seems to think it is. Your family is wrong. Look, I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you help people who didn't deserve your help. I've seen you be generous to a fault. The fact that you're finally drawing a boundary with someone who treated you horribly doesn't make you the bad guy. It feels like I'm destroying her future, though." "No, she destroyed her own future. You're just not saving her from the consequences." Jessica refilled our glasses. "Besides, losing money she didn't earn isn't the same as destroying her future. She's still young, still educated, still has every opportunity to build a good life. She just has to do it through actual work instead of a windfall." Michael joined us, settling into one of the porch chairs. "I showed that video to my ethics class," he said. Michael taught philosophy at the local community college. "Asked them to analyze it from a moral perspective. You know what the consensus was?" I shook my head. They said the cruelest part wasn't even the mockery itself. It was the fact that she made it public. If she'd said those things privately to friends, it would still be wrong. But making it a performance for strangers crossed the line. She weaponized public humiliation for personal gain. In this case, social media clout. Did any of them think she deserved a second chance? Most of them said second chances are earned through genuine remorse and changed behavior, not just because facing consequences is uncomfortable. One student pointed out that Chloe could take the video down and apologize publicly, but she's chosen not to. That tells you everything about her actual level of regret. The conversation helped. Being around people who understood nuance, who didn't just reflexively defend bad behavior because of family loyalty, reminded me that I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt and for respecting the boundaries I'd established. The video stayed up. Chloe didn't take it down or post any kind of apology. The view count climbed past 3 million. Comments continued flooding in, most of them encouraging her mockery. A few people defended me, pointing out that judging someone for their clothing choices was shallow and mean-spirited, but those comments were drowned out by the majority who found the whole thing hilarious. Whitfield and Associates worked quickly. Thomas called me in for a formal interview 5 days after our initial conversation. Their office was downtown, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. He sat across from me with a legal pad and a recording device, his expression neutral. "Tell me about your relationship with Chloe Porter prior to this incident," he said. I described the years of birthday cards and Christmas gifts, the times I'd attended her school plays and soccer games. I talked about helping pay for her college application fees when Michelle mentioned money was tight, about the laptop I'd bought Chloe for her high school graduation. I explained that I'd never told Chloe about the trust fund because I wanted her to focus on building her own character and capabilities rather than counting down to a windfall. And your sister Michelle, did she know about the trust? Yes, I told her when it was established. She agreed not to tell Chloe until right before her 21st birthday. Thomas made notes without commenting. Why do you dress the way you do? The way Chloe described in her video. The question caught me off guard. What does that have to do with anything? Context matters. If there's a reasonable explanation that Chloe might not have understood, it could impact how we evaluate her intent. I took a breath. After the acquisition, I realized that having money changed how people treated me. Old friends started asking for loans. Distant relatives appeared with investment opportunities. I got tired of the attention and the assumptions. So, I made a choice to live modestly. I drive a 10-year-old Honda. I shop at regular stores. I live in a nice but not ostentatious house. The money is invested, and I use it for things that matter to me, but I don't advertise my wealth. Did your family know this? Michelle knew I had money from the sale. She didn't know exactly how much, and I never discussed my financial choices with her in detail. I certainly never discussed it with Chloe. Thomas wrote something down. So, from Chloe's perspective, you might have appeared to be the less successful family member? Possibly, but that doesn't excuse publicly mocking someone for their appearance or perceived financial status. Those are values that transcend economic circumstances. He nodded slowly. One more question. If we determine the character clause has been violated and the funds are redirected, what happens to that money? The trust documents specify 3 charities, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, a women's shelter, and a literacy program for underprivileged children. And you're comfortable with that outcome? I met his eyes directly. I'm comfortable with the terms I agreed to 13 years ago. Whether I'm personally comfortable with the outcome is irrelevant. The review took another week. During that time, Michelle called me repeatedly. Her messages ranged from angry to pleading to accusatory. David sent me a long email explaining how hard they'd worked to raise Chloe, how this money would change their entire family's future, how I was being vindictive over something insignificant. I didn't respond to any of it. Chloe herself never reached out to me directly. According to Michelle, she was devastated and couldn't believe her aunt would do this to her. But devastated apparently didn't translate into removing the video or issuing any kind of public apology. The post remained up, still accumulating views and comments. On September 10th, 4 days before Chloe's birthday, I received a formal letter from Whitfield and Associates. The language was legal and precise, but the conclusion was clear: the character clause had been violated. The video demonstrated a pattern of deliberate cruelty, public humiliation of a family member, and values inconsistent with the responsible stewardship of significant financial resources. The full amount of the trust fund would be distributed to the designated charities instead of to Chloe Porter. The letter included a breakdown of where the money would go: $800,000 to the scholarship fund, $700,000 to the women's shelter, $800,000 to the literacy program. I sat with the letter for a long time, waiting to feel something other than the cold certainty that this was correct. That evening, I drove to the office of the scholarship fund that would be receiving their portion of the money. It was a small nonprofit run out of a converted house near the university. The director, a woman named Lisa Chen, was working late when I knocked on the door. "Miss Garrett," she said, recognizing me from our brief phone conversation earlier. "I wasn't expecting you to stop by in person. I wanted to see the organization before the funds were transferred, to understand where the money is actually going." Lisa invited me in and spent the next hour showing me around their operation. She introduced me to 2 college students who were current scholarship recipients, both working part-time jobs while maintaining full course loads, both first in their families to attend university. One was studying engineering, the other pre-med. They talked about how the scholarship meant they could focus on their education instead of working 40 hours a week just to cover tuition. "Without this program, I probably would have dropped out after my first semester," the engineering student, Alex, told me. "My parents wanted me to go to college, but they couldn't help financially. I was drowning in debt and exhaustion. The scholarship saved my academic career. The pre-med student, Maria, added, "It's not just the money. It's knowing that someone believes in us, that someone thinks we deserve the same opportunities as students who come from wealthy families." As I drove home that night, I thought about the contrast. Here were young people working incredibly hard, grateful for opportunities, focused on building something meaningful with their education. And then there was Chloe, who'd had every advantage, who'd never had to worry about money or access, who'd chosen to use her platform to tear someone down for entertainment. The money was going to the right place. Michelle showed up at my house the next morning. I saw her car pull into the driveway and knew immediately why she'd come. When I opened the door, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red. "How could you?" she said. "How could you do this to your own niece?" "I didn't do anything." Chloe's actions had consequences. Over a video, a stupid video that didn't even hurt anyone. It hurt me, Michelle. She held me up to millions of people as an object of ridicule. She mocked my appearance, my choices, my worth as a person. And you're standing here telling me that doesn't matter? Of course, it matters, but not like this. Not $2 million worth of matching. Michelle's voice broke. Do you know what this money would have meant? Chloe could have graduated debt-free. She could have bought a house. She could have had security for her entire life. She still can. She can work for it like most people do. Like I did. You got lucky with your stupid software company. Not everyone gets that chance. I worked 80-hour weeks for 5 years building that company. I sacrificed relationships and health and stability. It wasn't luck, Michelle. It was obsessive, exhausting work. And even if it had been luck, that doesn't entitle Chloe to money she didn't earn while simultaneously treating me like garbage. Michelle stared at me with something close to hatred. She's your family. So am I. I was your family when she made that video. Where were you then? I told her to take it down after it went viral, after millions of people had already seen it. And she still hasn't removed it, has she? Michelle looked away. That's what I thought, I said quietly. She's sorry she lost money. She's not sorry for what she did. My sister left without another word. I watched her car disappear down the street and felt something final settle into place. In the days that followed, I received messages from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. Most of them had opinions about what I should do, about family loyalty, about forgiveness. My cousin, Angela, sent a long text about how blood is thicker than water and how I was setting a terrible example by abandoning Chloe in her time of need. I wrote back, the full phrase is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." It means that bonds we choose are stronger than bonds we're born into. Chloe chose to humiliate me publicly. I'm choosing to respect the boundaries I established years ago to protect against exactly this kind of behavior. Angela didn't respond. My father called, which surprised me. He and I had never been particularly close, and he usually stayed out of family conflicts. Your mother is upset, he said without preamble. I know. She thinks you're being too hard on Chloe. What do you think? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. I think that girl has been spoiled her entire life. Michelle and David never told her no, never gave her real consequences for anything. Now she's 20 years old and doesn't understand that actions have repercussions. Maybe this is the lesson she needs to learn. The support was unexpected and made my throat tight. Thanks, Dad. Just because I agree with you doesn't mean I can say it out loud at family gatherings, he added. Your mother would have my head, but between you and me, you're doing the right thing. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. It wasn't a long conversation, but it mattered more than I could articulate. The birthday came and went. I didn't send a card or a gift. According to Laura, who still kept in touch with Michelle's side of the family, there was a small party with Chloe's friends from school. Nobody mentioned the trust fund, though apparently everyone knew. The video finally came down 3 days after her birthday, but by then screenshots and reposts had spread it across multiple platforms. I threw myself into work. My consulting practice had grown steadily over the years, and I took on 2 new clients who needed help scaling their operations. The days filled with meetings and strategy sessions and problem solving. In the evenings, I came home to my quiet house and felt grateful for the space. 2 months later, I received an invitation to a fundraising gala for the women's shelter that had received part of Chloe's trust fund. They were expanding their facilities to serve 50 additional families per year, and the donation had been transformational for their organization. The director wanted to thank major donors in person. I attended the gala in a dress from Dillard's and shoes I'd owned for 6 years. Nobody commented on my outfit. The shelter director, a woman named Eleanor Vance, gave a speech about how domestic violence survivors needed not just temporary housing, but pathways to genuine independence. The expansion would include job training programs, childcare services, and legal assistance. One donation in particular made this possible, Eleanor said, looking directly at where I sat. An unexpected gift that will change hundreds of lives. To the donor, if you're here tonight, thank you. You've given these families something more valuable than shelter. You've given them hope. The applause felt warm and real. I thought about Chloe sitting in her dorm room performing cruelty for an audience of strangers. Then I thought about the 50 families who would have a safe place to rebuild their lives. The math seemed clear enough. A few weeks after the gala, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of the women's shelter expansion, a beautiful new building with bright windows and a playground for children. There was a plaque on the front, the Porter Family Wing. Attached was a note from Eleanor Vance: "We wanted to honor the source of the donation even though we know the circumstances were complicated. This wing will house 15 families at a time and provide them with safety, resources, and hope. Thank you for making it possible." I hung the photo in my office where I could see it every day. Months passed. Fall turned to winter. I buried myself in work and found satisfaction in solving problems for my clients, in building strategies that actually helped businesses grow. The consulting practice expanded, and I hired an associate to help manage the increased workload. During this time, I started volunteering with the literacy program that had received part of the trust fund. Once a week, I spent 2 hours reading with elementary school children who were struggling with their skills. It was humbling work, sitting with a 7-year-old who couldn't sound out basic words, watching their frustration and shame. But it was also transformative to see their faces light up when something finally clicked, when they successfully read a whole sentence or finished their first complete book. These kids were fighting against circumstances beyond their control. Poverty, unstable housing, parents who worked multiple jobs and didn't have time for homework help. They weren't asking for millions of dollars. They just wanted a chance. One afternoon, I was working with a girl named Lily who reminded me painfully of young Chloe. Bright, curious, full of potential. She'd just finished reading a picture book all by herself, something that would have been impossible for her 2 months earlier. "I did it," she said, beaming with pride. "You absolutely did. How does it feel?" "Like I'm smart," she said softly. "My teacher said I might be smart after all." My heart broke a little. "You are smart, Lily. You've always been smart. Now you just have the tools to show it." Driving home that evening, I thought about privilege and opportunity, and the random luck of being born into circumstances that support success. Chloe had every advantage, every opportunity, every tool she could possibly need. These kids had almost nothing. Yet, they showed up every week working harder than Chloe had probably ever worked in her life, grateful for something as simple as someone taking time to read with them. The trust fund money was doing more good here than it ever would have in Chloe's bank account. Michelle and I didn't speak for the rest of that year. Christmas came without the usual family gathering. Laura told me that David's parents hosted something small, that Chloe came home from Duke for winter break and seemed quieter than usual. I sent a card to Michelle's house with a simple message, "Wishing you peace." She didn't respond. In January, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From Chloe." I stared at it for several minutes before opening it. The message was short: "Hi Sarah, I know I don't deserve a response. I know what I did was wrong. I've thought about it every day since my birthday. I understand why the trust fund was revoked, and I understand that you didn't do it. I did. I'm sorry for the video. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry I didn't realize how much you'd always been there for me until it was too late. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Chloe. I read it 3 times, looking for hints of manipulation or strategies for getting the money back, but the tone felt genuine, stripped of the performative confidence she'd had in the video. This was someone who had actually sat with the consequences of her choices. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let weeks pass while I considered what accountability actually looked like. Chloe had lost access to money, yes. But had she gained anything more valuable? Had the experience taught her something real about character and consequences? In March, I sent a brief reply. Thank you for your message. I appreciate your honesty. I hope you're learning and growing. That's worth more than any trust fund ever could be. She wrote back the same day. I'm trying. I got a job on campus and I'm paying my own expenses now. It's harder than I thought, but it feels better than I expected. Maybe we could talk sometime if you're ever willing. We met for coffee in April at a place halfway between my house and her college. Chloe looked different, less polished, more substantial somehow. She wore regular jeans and a university sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I'm not going to make excuses, she said before I could speak. What I did was cruel. I was showing off for people who don't actually matter, and I hurt someone who always mattered. I'm ashamed of who I was in that video. What changed? I asked. Losing the money forced me to actually think about what kind of person I wanted to be. When I had that trust fund waiting for me, I felt entitled to everything. I thought success was just going to happen because I deserved it somehow. Now I'm working for what I want, and it's teaching me things college never did. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her job at the campus library, about the scholarship she'd applied for and actually won on her own merit, about the volunteer work she'd started with a literacy program. She didn't ask about the money once. As I drove home that afternoon, I realized the trust fund had done exactly what I'd hoped, just not in the way I'd originally imagined. It hadn't given Chloe financial security. It had given her something more lasting. The character clause wasn't a punishment. It was a teacher, and sometimes the most important lessons come from what we lose rather than what we gain. The video was still out there somewhere, cached on servers and saved in screenshots. But Chloe was here, working and growing and becoming someone who understood that wealth means nothing without character. In the end, she'd received the most valuable inheritance I could have given her. She just had to lose $2 million to find it. What's a lesson you learned the hard way?